I'm going to start off with some announcements. Portrait Studio is on sale October 1st for anyone who doesn't know. If the sale is over, just like last time, and you guys come here and say, oh, I didn't make it for the sale, I didn't know there was a sale, how could you not know that a sale is coming up if I've announced it for 2 months now? I've given you guys a lot of time to prepare your tiny little wallets for your Portrait Studio purchase, but please just, don't be mad at me if the sale is done and you guys didn't make it and you send like endless messages on Facebook for promo codes or something like that. I have a promo code running right now, and I have Portrait Studio on sale October 1st. So spread the word if you can, but if you know anyone who might need it or use it. But I'm not going to host the sale any longer than 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the limit, so that we can stay fair for us, stay fair for the price, but keep it with 2 weeks. It is still a long time for anyone interested in all that. So I'm trying to be as fair as possible. So please save your adorable little wallets for the sale, and don't buy it yet if it's too expensive for you. There's really no point in buying it right now at the full price. It's almost $80 or $70. So you can get it at almost half off starting October 1st. Please wait. Please wait. I want to make sure that everyone has this. I want to be as fair as possible. That's why updates are free for life. So the updates that are currently available all were sent out for free. They automatically update. Abu just uploaded a tutorial video for Portrait Studio. Where are you? If anyone wants to know how to use it, how to figure it out, just go to my videos. It's right there, Portrait Studio, how to use Portrait Studio version 0.5 in-depth tutorial. So this is Abu going through every single major control, aspect, mouse. He's got diagrams in there. It's a 36-minute video all about Portrait Studio and how to use it. If you own it right now and the update has completely changed the dashboard for you, if you haven't used it in a while, then you can go there and kind of really get a good idea of all the major controls, how to lay out a simple scene, how to make a scene, how to set up your lighting, different controls that represent the performance values of your computer. Also, PC is the only version available right now, but it might be the only version available for the sale. The Mac release might be after the sale. The reason being is that we have to take some time in figuring out Mac equivalents of all the GPU related performance aspects, I guess, of Portrait Studio. So some stuff like enhanced lighting isn't going to be available for Mac users. But everything else is. It's just enhanced lighting, which is an extra little boost in your graphics card, is really good for PC. But for some reason, Mac doesn't make it very easy for developers to transfer that stuff over. And usually Macs aren't even equipped. From laptops to desktops, they're not equipped with the necessary GPU power to run Portrait Studio at its max. So a lot of you won't even be able to run Portrait Studio if we had a Mac version of enhanced lighting, because the Intel graphics integrated stuff, that stuff is way down the line when it comes to good lighting and being able to maximize it. It's a lighting engine, so it's going to be really difficult to run it on full power if you have a weak graphics card. Abu's really good with that stuff. Abu knows all about that stuff. If you have a Mac and you want to buy Portrait Studio once it's released for Mac, before or after or during the sale, we're not sure, email him. Go to istebrak.com and send in a form submission. Right here, it'll go straight to Abu. Ask him, I have this kind of, I'm not sure how Macs work. Find what your exact graphics card is, and make sure you write your email properly, or else we won't be able to reply. It has to be the right email. And ask Abu, okay, I have this kind of graphics card, will Portrait Studio run it? Abu is really good with that, really good with that stuff. So he'll look up the exact graphics card for you, and he'll tell you whether or not you'll be able to run it, at minimum at least, for Portrait Studio. Okay, so I'm going to be using a lot of Portrait Studio today because I wanted to take on some really enthusiastic lighting critique paintings. This one is going to be not as enthusiastic, but this one is very what's enthusiastic isn't the word, though it is very good for what I'm talking about. I'm not sure what the word is, but the word is escaping me. My brain is fried today. But this is a very complex critique that I'm going to be trying to take on, because what's missing here is a lighting environment. There are no cast shadows and everything is flat based values. So I need to make sure that we're covering some kind of lighting in the mix of all the figure stuff that we've been talking about in character. I feel like I haven't done any major light environment paint overs lately, and I'll be able to figure out exactly how to lay it out with the help of Portrait Studio. And I think that's it for announcements. I've already announced the class challenges that are up right now. So one of the challenges, the character environment integration challenge. Another one, which I'll upload the information for, is the Creepy Creature character design challenge for Halloween. If anyone wants to join in on those, you may do so. And the due date will be around the Halloween time. So the 30th, and the Thursday before that 30th is going to be the due date for the integration environment challenge, character integration environment, whatever. Character environment integration challenge. There we go. So let's get started. Okay, so right here, clear canvas, there's no Control Z. Right here is, I'm just going to unhide my, where is my secondary model? There we go. Show. So what you're missing, and what, by laying this top cube on top here, this cube, I've created a really super simplified version of the sculpture. And the sculpture here, let me just actually rotate the sculpture properly. Rotate the thingy properly. So this is the most simplified version of what we're seeing in the sculpture, and this is what you were missing. In your piece, you don't have any clear, distinct tonal changes in your painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grayscale it for us real quick. Okay, and I'm gonna go back to color because I want the full paint over to be in color. And this is apart from the framing that you did, which is, it leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not sure why this little panel has been made to take up so much of the space. If this was a studio, we could have easily just shifted her forward so this entire square isn't taking up all the space and she's thrown off to the side like a secondary subject. She is the point of interest. She should have been more towards the center, or this should have been pushed away and the canvas cropped a little better. Something that looks a little bit more like this. Oops. Merge down. Something that looks a little bit more like that. For the love of Jeebus. Alright, see that? So we're taking up less space altogether. Alright, so this is, I'm not going to hold back with the critique. I said I wouldn't do anything for the framing, but I really want you to see the difference. Alright. That should be enough. So where you had it before, way too much space for that little panel. I'm not sure why it was so important. And then after. Okay, and then I would crop the whole image down this way. It's just way too much space or way too much invested in. I would probably push her a little forward as well, because we're right back where we started, sort of, if we crop. I'm going to try to crop out here a little bit. She's a little bit too off to the side. But as you can see, the values that you use here are almost similar to the values on the darker half, even though the cast shadow is pointing to this being the darker half. So you have no real traceable route that the core shadow is traveling in. So I go to lighten, and I'm just doing this. I'm going to find a midtone, and I'm going to raise all the values in that area to that midtone. And I'm going to get darken, and I'm just preparing. These are the things you didn't, this is ugly. What I'm doing right now is horrible. It's horrible for the painting and just throwing a big splashy thing that destroys all your edges, but that's what you deserve for skipping your form studies. That's what happens. That's how you fix a painting that is nearly finished, that's how you fix its core shadows, by drawing big, ugly brush strokes that should have been preliminary brush strokes. You draw them way towards the end and destroy your painting. All right, another thing that was missing is cast shadows. None of them were available here. Okay, so there should have been some kind of cast shadow. Another thing that was missing, so I made this scene in Portrait Studio, and I'm just going to hide this object. Another thing, so I'm just using any basic Portrait Studio model here. I'm going to shift her. Okay. And just press her down. All right. So this would be the table, and I made only 2 legs of the table because those are the ones that would show. These would be hidden inside. The tutorial will show you how to duplicate, shapes and move them over and all of that. But the legs of the table and where I position the lighting, and by changing the lighting, you can really mess around with what looks more interesting. So what I would do is something where her cast shadow is right between these 2 legs, and not to sound cheesy, but her cast shadow is kind of constricted between these 2 kind of borders. She feels like she's a prisoner of some kind, or she's scared. So that's kind of a message that I would do. I was messing around with the cast shadows, and then it just clicked that I should keep them in between the 2 legs. It feels more constricted, like she's trapped. Tiny little message in the big painting. So that's something I explored in this kind of like lab environment here without having to mess around with it too much. But you were missing some sharper shadows. Soft lighting is on, so shadows in the distance, the further they get from the object. Casting them, the fuzzier they get, so you need some of that. And this shadow could be climbing up along the screen door. Again, another representation of who she is, trapped in this scene. She seems like she's a wallflower, not allowed to be herself. Something like that, you can really, really work with it. If that's the case, you might want to re-enlarge the canvas, the screen in the background, just like that. You might want to re-enlarge it. If that's what you want to do, you want to mess around with like a version of her, a shadow of her that's doing something else. So her shadow could be looking in another direction instead of, that's something you can't catch as easy. You have to really look at it in the canvas to see that her shadow is actually doing something else entirely, the person who she wants to be. Something like that. Okay, so fixing the framing, centering the story a little bit better, and being more strict with your core shadows are all ways you can improve this painting. I'm going to try to show you some of them. So what you were missing is the extension of the cast shadow even further down onto the ground, that canvas on the ground, and her cast shadow as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and do what I can. Do what I do best. Oops. Alright, there's her cast shadow in between, which, by the way you framed it, we really are not getting a chance to show that constriction of her shadow in between the legs. And then we have there we go. So I'm just gonna throw in some light, select inverse, and then try to cast some shadows with darken. This is the most important place here because this is where cast shadows are happening. So it's really, really important you get this right. And then I'm gonna get lasso tool, deselect. Oh, it's already deselected. And I'm gonna try again just to look at Portrait Studio. I'm gonna try to make it so this cast shadow is a little bit more expanding, sharper towards the foot that it's starting in. I haven't done one of these paint overs in a while. These really, really extensive lighting paint overs. Okay, and I'm going to try to carry that cast shadow of the table all the way up. So it's not going to travel all the way up as I would have wanted it, because that's just not the lighting you have in your image. But that's because you didn't prepare your lighting. So that's how I would use Portrait Studio, to prepare the lighting, to really just mess around with it as much as I can and prepare what I might use eventually. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? And then her cast shadow, I would just throw it a little bit more. Actually, where I placed it is a little wrong. I'm going to just throw a really just, oops, her head is leaning forward a bit, so she's doing a little bit more of that. Ooh, it kind of looks like an older lady, so maybe it's her older self in the cast shadow. Whoops, that's not gonna show. One of the biggest things that disappoints me in this painting is how you pulled off the jar. See, this is like just me being a little more protective, because that what I want to do is just assign you homework, you specifically. Because none of my private students ever get away without me assigning them a jar or two. Because just them just showing me what they can do in, you know, like a setting like that, where it's white, it's reflective, it's an open environment. I always assign these things. And just as something as simple as a jar should have been taken care of a long time ago. So I'm just trying to blur her shadow, because she's further away from the screen than the table, so she's going to have a lighter, fuzzier shadow. And then I'm just going to get smudge tool, and that really strong smudge that I have, the last one, the number 5, right? Yeah. And because I'm always reorganizing my stuff. I don't know if the order of the brushes on my brush set right now is the same order on the store. I don't know if you guys have a different order, because I've moved them around so much already and redid them a little bit without publishing the changes. They're just specific to me. So if I say a number 5 and it's not labeled number 5, it's just number 5 in reference to me. But you can see this, the preview of the brush. Okay, another thing that you missed is some just really simple core shadow stuff, like the leg of the table here. There's no real traceable core shadow or core light on that table. It doesn't have to be that bright, but it can be something similar. So any questions at all about any of these changes? There's a table leg right there. And if you're scared of placing in a simple squared light, you're not sure how to do it, you have like hierarchically, or whatever the word is, in the hierarchy of things that are your priority, painting an illustration should be the last thing right now. What you should be thinking about is just how to do this. Exactly what I'm doing right now. How to place in a core shadow on a rectangle. If you're not familiar with that, you should not be trying these illustrations. They're a little bit too, the word isn't enthusiastic. The word is, they're a little bit too ambitious. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, my Elevate app is getting me all crazy with this thesaurus lately. Okay, so there's going to be some cast shadows on the jar, which is going to be really nice. And that means that we are going to get the leftovers of that cast shadow right there on the plants, which are all going to be fuzzy. And I'm just going to use darken to apply these cast shadows here. And darker towards the bottom because it's a little bit closer. Alright, so we figured out what to do with the legs. Then there's her cast shadow. I'm not sure what's happening with her dress, if that's the foot. But I just want to clean up this area because we're using these lines here to travel up the painting. The line, this wonderful guiding lines being built right now that help the viewer travel across the painting. Now I want to move back into color, so I'm not sure how I'm going to pull that off. It might stay in grayscale instead of messing around with color mode. Another thing that's a big sign you need to stop everything and start doing some form studies, excuse me, are the folds. Your folds have no blends. And you're already halfway there. So when you have a smudge brush and you have edge, 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 which of these edges is going to be the gradient? Which of these edges is going to be the gradual tone? So it's going to be one of these here. Like, they can't all be sharp, or else you're not painting fabric anymore. And if this was a shadow, this is actually a cast shadow off this elevation. So if I have to go in there and technically explain every aspect of the fold that you're not understanding because you created a general idea of what you think a fold does, instead of actually systematically breaking down the folds from elevation, highest to lowest, and organizing where your lights go. I mean, if that's what I have to do, it means you have to, again, stop everything and do some organic form studies, some fold studies. These are the things that I assign all my students. Fabric studies, ask them about the horrid fabric studies I'm always assigning them, because fabric is really difficult. It's a combination of edge work and radial shading and blending, lots of blending and stacking and rotation, and lots of sharp forms. So if the fabric is on top of a pre-existing structure that has density versus the fabric that has no density. So you have none of these patterns here. You're speaking in none of that language. So this is one of those critiques where I want to track down the artist and just not allow them to do any more masterpieces. This entire area as a pocket is being hidden by her. So this entire area here stays a little bit dark. And the jar, the reason why there were such issues and it felt like cell shaded is because the jar had no radial shading on it either. It's a jar, it's a spherical object. If it is reflecting something, I don't think it'd be reflecting with all that sharpness there. The bounce light of the screen, it would reflect some of it. And then you have that distance over there being so bright. I would completely dim that scene. There's more of an empty room to fill compared to here where we need, oops. How do I adjust my tools again? Edit toolbar. Okay, I just need to find dodge tool and put it under sponge somewhere. There we go, done. So I'm just grabbing my dodge tool and just bringing in the contrast we need where there is some brightness. It's on midtones and 50. Okay, so I'm showing where the ray of light is, the main ray of light. Just ignore what I'm doing right now, but just focus on this region, this neighborhood I just created. Okay, so the ray of light is moving in this way behind her as the brightest point, and that'll be what's reflected back on the screen. As for, again, where you cropped, where you cut, it's just all a little bit off. The top is so empty, it feels like we're looking at the ceiling of a sitcom. We just shouldn't be seeing all those beams and stuff. It's bad framing. And this is just taking up a lot, just taking up so little of the canvas. Like I just want to keep cropping off the top, but keeping the canvas long. I think that's much better. We can crop off the base as well. Nope, that's not what I mean. Okay. Alright. And then there's her face. So the way you drew the 3/4 view here, the way you drew the nose, the way you drew the eyebrows, it feels like you don't want to be bothered with the work involved in painting and learning how to paint, the actual work involved, which is the study. If you don't want to study and you want to just bring your visions to life, I really can't, there's really no easy way for me to say that that's never going to happen. There's no way for you to pull off a complicated lighting scene like this with, complicated for you, I guess, or for a beginner, geometric shapes or complicated core shadow. All of that stuff is not going to be possible for you to skip. You can't skip the studying like that, and you can't pull off a painting that requires that kind of study. It's just not possible. Your brain hasn't been equipped with it. It's just not something that you have been trained to speak, and it's not a language that you know. So you're trying to speak in a language you've never trained in. And that has to stop. So as your teacher, what I would recommend, and as your advisor in this situation, is jump straight into portrait studies, combined with fabric studies, combined with three-quarter view portrait studies and rotation studies, combined with organic and geometric form studies. This is all teaching you the basics of what it means to apply light on form, to pull off the edge work required for a geometric shape or a geometric equivalent or geometric anatomy. And then you have the organic patterns and organic forms and blobs to be able to render her face and the fat pockets of her face, the bulbous shape of the vase. To understand cast shadows is to attempt more full rooms of form studies and form study environments. Okay, so if you were my student, I'd be assigning you all of that mandatory for at least a month, and would revisit this painting and ask you to redo it or correct it, and you'd probably pull it off a lot better. Also, one really massive benefit of form studies is that you learn how to organize your workflow a little bit better. You're not so overwhelmed with how much work is left. So for this student, I felt like they jumped across the painting here and there to finish. But when you do a form study and you know what you're doing, and you kind of have a great deal of study behind you, when you jump into a painting, you treat it as every form individually. And then because you know how to paint every form individually with such speed, the painting as a whole speeds up. So no tonal changes. There's no, because the side of the face and the front of the face are all in shadow. And the only part that doesn't have shadow is these immediate, because we go back here and we unhide. See how it's the most immediate areas that respond to the light source. Her face is in shadow. Her face isn't lit up the way you lit it up. So I would say just this area, and some of her nose, as we see here in our reference, as the area that is lit up. Well, she's not wearing a hat. She's wearing a really high bun though. Okay, so the expression is a little bit symbolic and forced. The expression doesn't feel, she does read as a younger girl because her face isn't so long, but how close the eyebrows are together makes it feel like you're painting front view eyebrows that are just like a centimeter apart. This eyebrow needs to be all the way over here. The expression still is the same, but this eyebrow needs to be here. I need to moderate Titan. And then, thank you, Titan. And then the nose, the distance between the nose for either eye is too symmetrical. For three-quarter view, even if she's Asian with a low nose bridge, she would still have one side of her nose closer to the far eye. The mouth is too symbolic. Just to draw a sad person, you don't have to draw a sad mouth. We can read sad out of a flat mouth, and that's an expression unit that I assign my students. So once I see that they have a good idea of front views, three-quarter view, and side view, I assign expressions. Then the position of this eye versus this eye, they weren't leveled in symmetry. They weren't rotated symmetrically. Symmetry doesn't mean both sides have to look the same. It means both sides would be the same if the face rotated back to front view after it's been seen or observed in three-quarter view. The eyebrows are great, but if she was about to cry, if she just got smacked or got hurt or I don't know what, so if she's contemplating a sadness, if she's a bit more ruminating on her situation in life, then you want to have a bit more of a suggestive expression, not the direct universal expression, which is that emoji expression. I would bring down any hints of a smile, but you can see some thought and some resentment as well. Her face is starting to kind of round together a little bit better. Before, after. This is typical three-quarter view, beginner three-quarter view. This is like probably your third three-quarter view in your life. I mean, it looks like the first one. Not the first one. It looks like about the third one. And the typical symptom of bad three-quarter view or bad rotation or no form study background or no studying with your form study or anything like that is that you're showing so much of the front view face. So it looks like a front view face in the before. You're trying to see, you use front view landmarks to paint a three-quarter view because front view is the only thing you know. That's the biggest giveaway that this is like the third three-quarter view painting you've ever tried. So I'm really harsh because I see that there's a massive like love for storytelling in you as the artist who specifically. I feel like you have a real desire to tell stories, but you don't want or don't have, I'm not sure what's going on, but you don't seem to be spending enough time figuring out where your skill is and where it's lacking. Right now you're lacking on all the cylinders. You're lacking on all the frontiers. Your anatomy, your rotation, your forms, your light on form, your edge work, your value sharing, your symbol dependency, your line dependency, your edge work, your edge language, your lack of trace over diagrams, your just name it, your depth, your light environment, your cast shadow knowledge, from knowledge to application. And then there's specific texture studies like fabric studies and fold studies. And there's a whole issue you have with rendering from reference. I'm not sure if you used a reference, if this was a photo that it pre-existed and you're trying to copy from it. The way you rendered the texture and the hair are all really just lacking. They're all in the beginning stats. Like you just spawned and you're wearing the starting armor. You need to focus on one thing. Okay, Istebrak, I believe you. You can stop ripping into me now. Where do I start? What's the first assignment? Assignment number 1 is form studies. Do some cubes, simple geometries, cylinders, pyramids, spheres, just on a simple layout. After that, complicate them. Make them weird, crazy looking polygons. Make them have notches. Make them have grooves. Make them have holes in them. At the same time, I want to see blobs and floating wormy shapes, and so you can study how to work with your radial shading and climb your values. I have so many videos on detailing all of these fundamentals. So one of my students today was a starting student. We just started together, and these are the videos I assigned her of mine. So there is this one, radial shading. I just searched radial shading Istebrak. These are all here. And then there's another video I recommend, which is how to paint with a light source. It's a little bit older. My mic was shitty. God, I hate my younger voice. But how to paint with a light source, talking about basic light on form. And then there's trace over diagrams and the value of trace over diagrams. And what they mean and how important they are for understanding light on form. Then there's another video that I have, which is what are edges? Blocking in, edge work, the before and after is really has a big change in the before and after, because I'm basically telling you how to add content to a painting, to how to finish it. And then there's what is rendering. These are all like the really standard videos. So a lot of people ask me, where do I start? Learn the key words, rendering, edge work, value sharing, and then search those in my channel history and you'll find them. Because my critique hour method is based off what the student's piece is, I'm always going back to basics. So you'll be able to find those videos. Even in the most recent stuff, you'll be able to find those subjects that I'm covering. So I don't want to just throw a critique at you and not tell you where to start. These all are videos where to start and how to start thinking about your piece. So planning your piece, wrap your head around the values and the light environment and the important fundamentals you're going to be employing to complete the painting, to execute it. So this is the before and the after. I'm going to try to position it where it was. So before, after, a little bit better. I can't go in there and repaint the fabric. The thing is with the fabric is that I can't tell if it's a big mushy blob textury thing or fabric because it's not responding to gravity. There are no bows or arcs that are responding to gravity. Nothing is pointing down. All right, so that's with this texture. With the hair, it's a little bit too detailed, reaching into the scalp. Then there's the silhouette of the female. Even if she's wearing a kimono or something, you can still show off some kind of female silhouette read so that we can read a bit more in her figure, or else she's just a standing potato. And she looks a little bit too much like a potato. I know a kimono does not make a woman look like a potato, especially those really like high level 1000 armor kimonos, those really pretty ones. Images. Okay, summer traditional kimono. Always with the shopping. Alright, so there's a lot of female visible here, the waistline, the shoulders at the top, the high breast line, and then the curves visible, as well as the way that these are reading like more like wings, and then supporting that big triangular heavy, like that very, very shape heavy language. There's a lot to be seen here in the feminine figure, especially with the tight knot at the top. Okay, she doesn't have to look like a potato. Okay, so you could have pushed that section and it feels like she's pregnant or something. Again, you have ways of depicting that. You don't have to leave it as an involuntary read. There are other ways to depict that. Okay, so before, she's thrown off all the way at the side. There's no cast shadows, nothing like that. I mean, there's not much for the before and afters. I couldn't really add that much to the painting. And then finally, I will add the bloom, which is a little effect. It's not a lot. The reason why I'm leaving it at the end is because students love just bringing this stuff in and acting like that's all the painting needed. It's not. There's some subsurface you can sneak into the screens here. Some subsurface scattering because the screens are translucent, sorry. Okay, and then there's the fact that all of this, there was no light drowning at all on the character. The hair wasn't reflecting any kind of like nearby light, and the vase wasn't reflecting any light. There were no tonal changes on the leg, and then there's the leg traveling across the table, across the ground. Or, whoopsie. This whole area would be dark. Ignore that. It's supposed to be traveling this way. There's the ground, not receiving any light. And then there's the framing, when the ground gets further away from the light source. They're separating the depths back here and blurring. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Anything in the background should be blurred. Okay, and if there is just a little bit of light sneaking through in the background, you can kind of like show it off this way. Oops. Okay, when I first started watching Istebrak 2 years ago, I thought she only roasted people, but then I realized she was trying to help people and get rid of bad habits. She has mellowed a bit too. I don't think I've mellowed at all. Many times that wrap around the stomach on traditional kimonos really is that bulged out. The bigger the wrap, the fancier, I guess. I'm not talking about the back piece here. Also, the sleeves are way too bulky considering it's silk. I've never seen super kimono bulky silky sleeves. I've seen the thick wintry ones, but the silky ones are usually what we're looking at. Well, I mean, she's indoors, so maybe you could have eased up a little bit on that and we could have gotten a really nice silhouette going on for her shape, because that's a detail additive that's missing. that you could have taken advantage of. Something as simple as that would have worked just fine. Okay, see what it adds to her figure? And then the sticky stick. No. I don't know why people would think I'm only roasting. Like, why would I do that? I mean, people who still think that I only roast artists. Why? Well, at least I know people aren't thinking like that all the time. Okay, so before, after, I feel like there might still be some light up here. Just some subsurface glow from the far room. And then her position in this entire painting is just a little bit too off still. It's because I can't add info from the side. And I would radially, and if you don't know what radially means, you should not be trying a masterpiece. But I would radially include some drowning lights and stronger kind of tonal changes here in the piece. Some light coming off the sides where it can reach behind her as well might help. You're building an entire scene and you're not equipped with the language to pull that off. Alright, so good luck. Good luck on your journey. I wish you luck. It's not as long as you think it is if you do it efficiently and you organize and fragment your learning process. Okay. And then this, what's happening here, maybe I can bring in the male model. Yes. Yes. Just bring in a figures. Okay, so, oh. Okay, so the light can be from the top down. I'm gonna bring his arms down. So you can pose this dude any way you want. If you want to know how to use it, there's always the tutorial Abu just uploaded for you guys. Okay. Strength is high. Vertical angle is strong. Okay, so I'm gonna rotate him. He looks a little stiff. Let's ease him up a little bit. Alright, so we go back to your guy. And I want you to take a look at... Let me just... high joints. I want you to take a look at what's happening with... For the love of Christ. Oh, God. There we go. I want you to take a look at this guy. So the 3/4 view is good. You have the C shapes in order, but take a look at this. Look at the averaging. Jumping up and down, there's really no major average change until we get down here. Then we start occupying this section. Look at what's happening to the color picker circle. All right. We go right back to the average middle. Barely jumping across. And then we'll take this screenshot. I don't know if it goes to my desktop. I forgot. Oh yeah, it does. Alright. Zoom in. Look at the changes in the values. Okay, see how we're occupying the top? This is too dark for a collarbone, but this is because it's a mannequin. Okay, now look at what's happening to the color picker. Look how it's getting darker and darker. It actually has a curve, and then it gets light again because we have upward facing planes. But you go right back down. That's called radial descent of your values. That's the radial changes Things are getting darker because we're rotating inward. Your form here isn't rotating inward at all. There's no rotation. There's no just changes of value as the object starts to look away from the light. I'm not even sure where the light's coming from. From the top, so gotta do this carefully. Lighten. Okay, so we've got light from the top, light on the top of his head. So for the person whose work was just looked at, if you're feeling bummed out and you're like, fuck this girl, screw all this, screw you, I have too much work to do, I'm going to give up on art. This artist, you could say, is very talented, right? But they had form study problems. Form study problems will haunt you forever. There's no way of escaping that. So don't feel bad if you made a mistake with forms, because everyone's neglecting forms. It's not just you who has to study them. But the sooner you study them, the easier it will be for you to shade. So simply, you'll shade with your eyes closed. Because you will not be able to unsee the form. The brain, once it learns a language, can't just unlearn it. Have you ever tried unlearning something you've learned? It doesn't work like that. You can forget, but you'll be reminded. I mean, there's just always getting rusty, but you can't unlearn something. So have faith that every single form study you spend time on is going to pay off. And if you're that artist, and I know you are, you know that the form studies will help you, but you choose not to do them because they are just, oh, it'll happen on its own. I learned how to ride a bike, and I didn't really have to do form studies for that. So it'll happen on its own is what you're thinking. It's not. It's not going to happen. You will always have those traceable issues with form in your work, and that's what we're looking at right now. Okay, this artist is also pretty line dependent. If he's saggy, the nipples should be a little bit more saggy. His nipples seem a little bit too perfect for an old man. Magazine nipples right here. Showing that inward C, and the little bump out is just enough. Trying to clean that up here. And if he does have, like, I've seen some old men that have these crazy strong arms, but everything else screams old man, but they've got like 20-year-old arms. That may be what he has, so you might want to throw in the edge here just to show off the extra musculature. And then if there's some other kind of edge nearby, you need to climb that value up. I'm just looking at the navigator for my read. If the navigator is too small, enlarge it, but it shouldn't be huge. The navigator is always something you keep your eye on. And nice. Look at this. Look. Look how thick my brush is. Bam. Just like that is what you have to do sometimes. Alright. A little coarse shadow here for the base of the breasts. Even though they don't have much volume to them, you still have to show how they layer. But being very, very wary of the tone changes down here. This is a new neighborhood of values, so it needs a completely separate set of, it's a completely new palette. Okay. And then, so none of this stuff was visible in your piece. You need to start rethinking your anatomy studies as well as your form and geometric anatomy studies. The geometric equivalent of every major anatomical group of muscles or otherwise in the body. Especially areas that you're going to be using a lot. So that's why I don't really worry when my students don't know how to paint a set of toes or a knee. I'm not really worried about that, but I am worried when they can't paint a torso, because look at this. The torsos are used constantly in concept art. People are always shirtless nowadays. Pants, mostly for men. Female legs I would rush. I would rush all gender arms. I would rush the portrait, of course, if you want to be a character artist. Do you have no like bumps or little skeletal juts to the silhouette here and there. You have none of that detail going on. You're missing a lot. Okay. Then I'm going to get my soft brush because some of these are organic shapes that I have to consider. And that's the core shadow of the chest. Running from the side and getting darkened on one side. I need to zoom out for this. And just blending away. Filter, liquefy. Any questions at all? When should you do an illustration? I feel like I've been studying a lot but haven't gotten anywhere. When did you used to do an illustration when you were younger? You know, when you felt compelled to draw, it was always because there was a story behind it. So when you do an illustration is when you have no option but to build the world because the story compels you to do that. Or you're hired to do an illustration because the hirer, the employer, has a story for you to bring to life. That's when you do an illustration. That's why I don't do many illustrations, because I don't have any stories that compel me. But I am still studying in the off chance that something inspires me in life. Unlikely. Or, you know, I go back to freelancing, which is very, very unlikely. So that's when you do an illustration. An illustration is a flexing of your muscles. It's a test of who you are. An illustration is a performance thing. It's a stage thing. When you are off hours, which is actually I would call illustration off hours, on hours, live hours would be studying. When you are not employing the narrative for employment reasons or otherwise, you are studying. So with this pressure to feel like you got to render stuff, you need to let go of that pressure. All of you need to let go of it. There's no pressure to create. There's no pressure because that pressure is going to encourage you to overvalue your identity as an illustrator versus your identity as a student. Your identity of the student is more important to groom. Write that back to me. Because that means you're not going to get too egotistical and forget to do a simple form study, which makes all the difference in your work. So he has his overalls off. We would still see some of the background there. He seems like he's a fit boy. Okay. And then, if they're overalls, I really don't know what I'm looking at, but probably like a blacksmith's overall type thing. Arms tend to get thinner the more in you go. And I'm just going to blur away that lasso edge. Whoa. Whoa. Okay, so when I'm telling you guys, don't worry about not being an illustrator. Don't worry about it. Because this artist here has worried about it, and they forced themselves to under-render a face and over-render some tools and completely throw off the focal point of their character design. They also don't have any form studies here. They're still going to have to go back to the drawing board. They still made tons of mistakes. Don't be fooled by a complete drawing because it means nothing when the things that have completed it are incomplete. So when you're looking at a bridge, the bridge looks great. Wow, what a beautiful bridge. What a nice bridge. Someone walks over it and the bridge falls apart. Something can look cool and finished, but look closer, and the student has neglected like 25 hours of form studies. And if they had just not neglected it, at least if they were just 15 hours into form studies, they would know not to forget about a torso light. Okay. So before, completely flat, line-dependent sketch. After, more shading involved there. Yes, your identity as a student is more important than your identity as an artist because one will support the other. You just can't do more of one than another. That's not right. Where's my burn tool? Are you serious? These are tools that I need, man. Oh God. Okay. I forget where I went to. Okay, let me find the burn tool. Put you right under your buddy, which is the dodge tool right there. Okay. This area just needs to be burned a little bit with some shadows. Because these are pockets around the armpits and stuff. Before, after. See how alive it is when it responds to a nearby light source. And because the room is so bright, I would diffuse some areas with some bounce light. Maybe some bounce light there, some bounce light there, coming off the arm. Any questions? Many times the wrap around the stomach. I should do an illustration. Pure Ref resize is Control plus Alt and drag. Control plus Alt and drag. I just bought Pure Ref like right before class, so I didn't know how to use it. I thought it was simple. Apparently. With the screen in that background, it seems like the light seems to be a light source. If not, should it be darker? Are you talking about the kimono painting? For Pure Ref, Control, Alt, and drag. Thank you, Nina. You're so sweet to look that up for me. Any questions at all? Very form study intensive class. A lot to do with lighting, and a lot to do with the masterpieces talk. A lot of that stuff is floating in the air right now, and I feel like I should do another big masterpieces rant. It's kind of what got me out there. Everyone got so pissed off that I said stop doing masterpieces. But stop with the masterpieces. How are you doing a masterpiece? You have no mastery to represent. You are not actually putting in the work to develop the mastery. What are you mastering? Master your radial shading. Master your edge work. And then you can call yourself a master of those fields. But how is this a master study if you're just half in your studies? You haven't even graduated Form Studies 101. So you need to start thinking about this stuff. If you're doing a master study, what is it exactly that you are showing off? Okay, Titan. Is that hair on the right breast or a shadow? That's a shadow, cast shadow. I'm just throwing in some cast shadows. The class spoke a lot about the overall art progression. The talking points came flying. Pow, pow, pow. For the rest of the body, I wouldn't worry so much about rendering the legs, but you do have to have some kind of values for that leg area fold. All the folds there need to have some kind of just simple brush strokes here and there. Something that looks like this. Okay. So for anyone who wants to try a masterpiece that is guided, it's not really a masterpiece. I consider the challenges in our sessions, the community challenges, as studies. You're studying the illustration process. Please watch previous classes, previous critique hours for community challenges. I talk a lot about cinematic framing and stuff, so that's going to be necessary for any illustration. But the things that we do together, they're all guided. It's a guided with an art director and everything. You have a group of people working on the same quote-unquote masterpiece. So you have all of that set up for you previously, and you have a written narrative as well. And it's teaching you how to continue writing some of the narrative. So not all of the choices are made for you. So yes, it's a masterpiece in the sense that you are trying to make it a full illustration, but you still have to do thumbnail studies. You still have to do gesture studies. You still have to do a lot of planning and preparation for the challenges for our community. So please don't neglect the planning stages or anything that supports or promotes the presence of your fundamentals, and all the ways, all the requirements for the community challenge are all promoting fundamentals. Fundamentals aren't just the rules of physics. Fundamentals are rules of, execution and technique and application. That's organizing your workflow, doing your thumbnails beforehand, really, really basic stuff. And that's what we're studying when we do a community challenge together. It's also a great way to get people into drawing again. and remind them why it is they draw. So yeah, I've talked a lot about form, and very seriously, because it's a serious subject, and I talked about it for an hour. But don't forget that I understand some of you just want to draw. Some of you just feel like drawing and want to draw something spectacular and beautiful. Try it. It's going to add something to your mileage, however inefficiently. But remember that you can do all that as long as you have this safety net of form studies behind you. Still life studies, anatomy studies, reference studies, anything to fill your visual library so you're seeing less with the symbol and more with the form, with the cube. All right? It's all about the cube. Cube is king. No more masterpieces. These are some of the oldest mantras from my channel. Just to add it, resizes to scale only. It resizes to scale only. I can't get rid of my sketch whilst painting. I cannot draw well without a sketch. That's because you don't know how to replace your lines. Your understanding of edges is that there's no edges. There's only lines in the real world. You got to look around you and see the difference between a plane and something in front of it that doesn't share space. That's an edge in between them. That's where you would have put a line. So you need to start replacing the lines with edges. It makes so much sense now after that liquefy. Yeah, the breast wasn't, it didn't have volume. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate all of you being here today. Go to istebrak.com if you want to join the community challenges to do that, or submit anything for Critique Hour. Click on the Google Plus icon on my website and read through the rules first. There are some rule breakers hanging around. Also, I am in need of some active mods. So our mod, Tom, has spent so much time on the community. He's helped us in so many ways. But he has taken a break from modding, and another one of my mods is non-existent, is gone. I only have one left of the 3 main mods I had for my channel for almost 2 years or 3 years now. So if anyone's interested in modding the community channel for me, if I'm not able to, I always look at it 5 or 6 times a day. But sometimes I don't catch it. People wait for their stuff to be accepted into the channel, and it's probably overnight for me. So if anyone here from different time zones want to mod for my channel, and you've been around for a while, I'm going to be adding some trustees that I know, but if I do need more, so to apply to be a mod on the Discord as well as on my channel, just go to istebrak.com and click on the Facebook group, and you can message me there on Facebook, okay? Masterpiece study. Study/masterpiece. Yeah, I think Kyle is going to be a mod. I'm not sure. Cube is king in the north. Titan, I love you. I'm not sure if Titan's going to have time, but I'll talk to him. It is a bit of work. You do have to look through it at least 2 or 3 times a day, and you have to approve of some stuff. Questions asked. You're going to have to look at the rule breakers and apply bans if needed. Lots of spam is targeting our page because we're reaching 9,000 members. So it is quite a bit of work. It's not a crazy amount of work, but it's just volunteer work if anyone's interested in it. I try to get as much as I can, and Taurus is doing a wonderful job in looking through it, but I don't want to throw too much of the work on him. Okay, so that's it for today. Don't forget about the Portrait Studio sale if anyone's interested in owning it. Any of the brushes I used are also available on my website. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you guys next week, Tuesday the 25th. Bye everyone.